The Galactic Council had kept peace among the stars for 12,000 cycles. Hundreds of species lived under its protection. They traded goods. They shared knowledge. They believed that the old wars were finished forever. But they were wrong. Ambassador Vethran stood at the window of his office on Cathora Prime. His silver scales caught the light of the twin suns as he watched children playing in the garden below. The Ketherans were a peaceful people. They had no army. They had no weapons. They believed that wisdom and kindness were stronger than guns and ships. For 3,000 years, this belief had kept them safe. Today, that belief would be tested. The first warning came from a trading ship at the edge of the system. The pilot's voice was filled with fear as he reported what he saw. Hundreds of warships were dropping out of hyperspace. They carried the markings of the Veluxi Dominion. Vethran felt his blood turn cold. The Veluxi were conquerors. They had destroyed 37 worlds in the past 3 centuries. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. He ran to the communication center and sent an emergency message to the Galactic Council. His words were simple and desperate. "We are under attack. Please send help. We have no way to defend ourselves." The response came within the hour. High Counselor Marntic appeared on the screen. His face showed sympathy, but his words offered nothing. "Ambassador Vethran, we have discussed your situation. The Council has decided that we cannot intervene. The Veluxi Dominion has not attacked any Council member world. Your planet exists in neutral space. We are bound by treaties and agreements. We cannot risk a larger war." Vethran could not believe what he was hearing. "My people will die. Millions of innocent lives will be lost. How can you stand by and do nothing?" Marntic looked away from the screen. "I am sorry, Ambassador. Truly, I am. But my hands are tied. The Council has spoken." The transmission ended. Vethran stood alone in the communication center, surrounded by the sounds of sirens and screaming. Through the window, he could see Veluxi dropships falling through the sky like black rain. The attack was swift and brutal. Veluxi soldiers moved through the cities with cold efficiency. They rounded up civilians. They burned libraries and hospitals. They showed no mercy to anyone who resisted. Vethran escaped the capital with a small group of survivors. They fled to a transport ship hidden in an underground hangar. As the ship lifted off, Vethran looked back at his burning world. Fire spread across the continents. Smoke filled the sky. Everything he had ever known was being destroyed. The transport jumped to hyperspace, just as Veluxi fighters closed in on their position. They had escaped, but they had nowhere to go. The Council had abandoned them. Other species were too afraid to help. It seemed like all hope was lost. Then Vethran remembered something. A memory from a diplomatic meeting 2 years ago. He had met representatives from a young species called humans. They had only achieved faster than light travel 60 years before. The Council considered them primitive and unimportant. But Vethran remembered something else about them. They had offered to help anyone who needed it. No conditions. No treaties. Just a simple promise. It was a small hope. Perhaps no hope at all. But it was the only one he had left. Vethran went to the communication console and recorded a message. His hands were shaking. His voice was tired. But his words were clear. "This message is for the people of Earth. My name is Vethran. I am an ambassador of Cathora Prime. My world is dying. The Veluxi Dominion has attacked us without warning. The Galactic Council has refused to help. We have no army. We have no weapons. We have only ourselves and our hope that someone will hear this message and come to our aid. I do not know if you can help us. I do not know if anyone can. But I am asking, please, if there is any kindness in your hearts, please help us." He sent the message toward Earth and waited. On Earth, It was 3 in the morning when the message arrived. Admiral Jack Morrison was sleeping in his quarters at Fleet Command when his personal communicator began to beep. He opened his eyes and checked the screen. Priority 1 transmission. Unknown origin. He sat up and played the message. The face of a silver-scaled alien appeared on the screen. The alien looked exhausted and afraid. As Morrison listened to the words, something stirred inside his chest. It was a feeling he knew well. It was the feeling that told him he had to do something. He was out of bed and dressed in 5 minutes. Within the hour, he was standing before the United Earth Defense Council. The room was filled with generals, admirals, and political leaders from every nation on the planet. They had all seen the message. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison said, "we have received a request for help from a species called the Ketherans. Their world is under attack by the Veluxi Dominion. The Galactic Council has refused to intervene. They have no one else to turn to. General Patricia Cole, commander of the North American forces, leaned forward. What do we know about the Veluxi? They are a military empire from the Outer Rim. They have conquered dozens of worlds. Their fleet is large and well-equipped. By any reasonable measure, they outgun us significantly. And the Ketherans?" asked Admiral Samuel Grant, commander of the Pacific Fleet. "Peaceful. No military. No weapons. They are scholars, healers, and artists. The Veluxi are slaughtering them without resistance." The room was silent for a long moment. Everyone understood what Morrison was asking. He was asking them to send their ships and their soldiers into a war against a superior enemy. He was asking them to risk everything for a species they barely knew. Defense Secretary Maria Torres spoke first. "Admiral Morrison, what exactly are you proposing?" Morrison looked around the room. He saw doubt in some faces, fear in others. But he also saw something else. He saw the same fire that burned in his own heart. "I am proposing that we answer this call. I am proposing that we send our fleet to Kether Prime and drive the Veluxi out. I am proposing that we show the galaxy what it means to be human." The debate lasted less than an hour. When the vote was taken, it was unanimous. Humanity would respond. Morrison walked out of the council chamber as the sun began to rise over the city. He looked up at the sky and thought about what lay ahead. 18 days of travel. A battle against a powerful enemy. The possibility of defeat and death, but also the possibility of something else. The possibility of saving an entire world. The possibility of proving that humans were more than just another species fighting for survival. The possibility of showing the universe that when someone called for help, humanity would always answer. He pulled out his communicator and began issuing orders. The fleet would assemble within 72 hours. Every ship, every soldier, every resource they could spare. They were going to war, not for territory, not for power, not for revenge, for the simple reason that someone had asked for help, and that was enough. The news spread across Earth like fire through dry grass. Every television channel carried the same story. Every social media platform buzzed with the same conversation. Humanity was going to war among the stars. Some people were afraid. They asked why humans should risk their lives for aliens they had never met. They pointed out that the Veluxi were stronger and more experienced. They warned that this mission could end in disaster. But many more people felt something different. They felt pride. They felt purpose. They felt that this was the moment their species had been waiting for since they first looked up at the stars and wondered what was out there. Captain Kate Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the carrier Endurance and watched the fleet assemble. She had served in the military for 20 years. She had fought in the Mars Uprising and the Saturn Station incident. She had seen things that most people could not imagine. But she had never seen anything like this. Ships were arriving from every corner of human space. American destroyers flew alongside Chinese cruisers. Russian frigates formed up with Brazilian carriers. European, African, Asian, and Australian vessels took their positions in the growing formation. For the first time in history, the entire human military was coming together as one force. Lieutenant Commander Nathan Price walked up beside her. He was her tactical officer and one of the best strategists in the fleet. His tablet was filled with numbers and calculations that made her head spin. "Final count is in," he said. 47 warships, 12 carrier groups, 218,000 personnel, plus support vessels, supply ships, and medical frigates. Sullivan shook her head in amazement. "How long to reach Kethra Prime?" 18 days at maximum warp. The Veluxi have been on the ground for 6 days already. Every hour we delay, more Kethrans die. Then we better move fast." Down in the hangar bay, Marines were loading onto dropships. Sergeant Danny Webb helped his squad check their gear for the 5th time. They were young soldiers, most of them fresh out of training. They had joined the military hoping for adventure. Now they were about to get more than they ever expected. Private Amy Collins, the youngest member of the squad, looked nervous as she checked her rifle. "Sarge, what do you think the Veluxi are like? I mean, up close?" Webb had seen the intelligence reports. He knew what they were walking into, but he also knew that fear was contagious. If he showed his own doubts, his squad would fall apart. "They bleed just like anything else," he said calmly, "which means they can be killed. Focus on your training, follow your orders, and watch out for the soldier next to you. That is all you need to do." Collins nodded, looking slightly less afraid. Webb turned back to his own gear and tried to ignore the cold feeling in his stomach. On the bridge of the command ship Victory, Fleet Commander Daniel Hayes prepared to address the entire armada. He was an old soldier with gray hair and deep lines on his face. He had lost friends in every conflict humanity had ever fought. He knew the cost of war better than anyone alive, but he also knew why this war mattered. The communication officer signaled that all ships were ready to receive. Hayes stepped up to the microphone and began to speak. "This is Fleet Commander Hayes to all ships and personnel. In a few hours, we will begin our journey to Kethra Prime. We are going to fight an enemy we have never faced before. We are going to defend the people we barely know. Some of you may be wondering why. Some of you may be asking if this is worth the risk." He paused and looked out at the stars. "Let me tell you why we are doing this. We are doing this because someone asked for help. A peaceful world, full of innocent people, is being destroyed by an enemy that shows no mercy." The Galactic Council turned their backs. Other species looked away. But we are not going to look away. We are humans. And humans do not abandon people who need help. Across the fleet, soldiers and sailors listened in silence. Some of them had tears in their eyes. Others gripped their weapons with new determination. "I will not lie to you," Hayes continued. "This fight will be hard. The Veluxi are strong. They have conquered many worlds before us. Some of us will not come home. But I believe in you. I believe in every single one of you. I believe that when we work together, there is nothing in this galaxy that can stop us." He took a deep breath and spoke his final words. "We go not because we were asked by the Council. We go because someone needed help, and we were able to give it. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human. All ships, prepare for jump. May God watch over us all." The fleet began to move. One by one, the ships activated their warp drives and disappeared into the void. From Earth, the departure looked like a string of lights blinking out of existence. Millions of people watched from the ground, from space stations, from colonies on the Moon and Mars. They watched their sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers vanish into the unknown. On the observation deck of the Endurance, Captain Sullivan felt the familiar hum of the warp drive engaging. The stars stretched into long lines of light as the ship jumped to hyperspace. There was no turning back now. She pulled up a display showing the fleet formation. 47 warships moving as one unit through the void. It was beautiful in a way that was hard to describe. Lieutenant Commander Price joined her at the display. I have been running simulations on the Veluxy fleet. Based on our intelligence, they have approximately 60 warships around Kethra Prime. Their shields are strong, and their weapons have longer range than ours. Sullivan nodded. So we are outgunned. On paper, yes. But I have also studied their tactics. They fight in rigid formations. They expect their enemies to do the same. They have never faced an opponent who fights the way we do. And how do we fight? Price smiled slightly. Like we have nothing to lose. In the mess hall, soldiers ate their meals and talked about what lay ahead. Some told jokes to hide their fear. Others sat in silence, thinking about the people they had left behind. A few wrote letters to their families, just in case they did not make it home. Corporal Maria Santos sat alone at a corner table. She was a combat medic from Texas. She had joined the military because she wanted to help people. Now she was heading toward a war zone to do exactly that. She pulled up a picture of her daughter on her tablet. The little girl was smiling and waving at the camera. Santos touched the screen gently and made a silent promise. She would do everything in her power to make it home. But first, she would do everything in her power to save as many lives as possible. That was why she had become a medic. That was why she was on this ship. That was why she was ready to face whatever waited at Kethra Prime. The fleet traveled through hyperspace for 18 days. The soldiers trained. The officers planned. The engineers checked and rechecked every system. Everyone prepared for the battle ahead. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the Veluxy Dominion waited for them. Supreme Commander Draxfol had received reports of the approaching human fleet. He had studied their ships and their weapons. He had concluded that they were no threat. He was about to learn how wrong he was. On the 18th day, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kethra system. Captain Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Endurance and looked at the tactical display. Kethra Prime hung in the distance, surrounded by Veluxy warships. Fleet Commander Hayes opened the command channel. His voice was calm and steady. All ships, this is Commander Hayes. Battle stations. Execute Battle Plan Omega. Show them what we are made of. The war for Kethra Prime had begun. Supreme Commander Draxfol stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human fleet approach. His body was covered in thick black armor that had protected his species for generations. His yellow eyes showed no fear, only cold amusement. These are the reinforcements, he said to his second officer. A handful of tiny ships from a primitive species? The officer nodded. Yes, Supreme Commander. Our intelligence reports indicate that humans only achieved faster than light travel 60 years ago. They have never fought a major space battle. They are no threat to us. Draxfol made a sound that might have been laughter. Signal the fleet. Standard intercept formation. We will crush them quickly and return to our work on the surface. The Veluxy fleet began to move. 60 warships arranged themselves in a perfect wall of metal and weapons. Each ship was larger than anything the humans had brought. Their shields glowed with power. Their cannons hummed with deadly energy. On the bridge of the Victory, Fleet Commander Hayes watched the enemy formation take shape. Lieutenant Price stood beside him, analyzing the tactical data. They are forming a wall, Price reported. Classic Veluxy tactics. They expect us to approach head-on and try to break through their line. Hayes nodded slowly. Then we will not do that. Signal all ships. Execute Battle Plan Omega. Attack groups scatter on my mark. Across the fleet, captains relayed the orders to their crews. Pilots strapped into their fighters. Gunners powered up their weapons. Marines prepared for boarding actions. Everyone knew their role. Everyone was ready. Hayes gave the signal. The human fleet exploded into motion. Instead of approaching as single formation, the ships broke apart into dozens of smaller groups. Each group moved independently, weaving and dodging through space in patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually carefully planned. Draxful watched the display with growing confusion. What are they doing? This makes no sense. They are scattering like prey animals. His tactical officers studied the screens. I am not sure, Supreme Commander. Their movements do not match any known combat doctrine. It does not matter. Open fire. Destroy them all. The Veluxy fleet unleashed a storm of energy weapons. Brilliant beams of green light cut through space, aimed at the approaching human ships. The attack should have destroyed half the enemy fleet in seconds, but the human ships were not where the weapons were aimed. They had already moved, changing direction with speed and agility that the Veluxy systems could not track. The energy beams hit nothing but empty space. On the Endurance, Captain Sullivan gripped her armrests as the ship banked hard to avoid enemy fire. The inertial dampeners whined under the strain. Her crew worked their stations with calm efficiency. Return fire, she ordered. All weapons, target their lead destroyer. The Endurance launched a barrage of missiles and kinetic rounds. Other human ships joined the attack, concentrating their fire on a single Veluxy vessel. The enemy shields flared under the impact. Then they failed. Then the ship exploded. Draxful stared at his display in disbelief. One of his destroyers was gone. A ship that had conquered entire worlds, destroyed by these primitives in a matter of seconds. How is this possible? He demanded. His officers had no answer. The battle quickly became something the Veluxy had never experienced. The human ships refused to fight in formations. They attacked from every direction at once. They closed to point-blank range, ignoring the danger to themselves. They traded damage willingly, sacrificing their own shields to land killing blows on enemy vessels. 3 more Veluxy ships exploded in the first 10 minutes. Then 5 more. Then 8. On the Victory, Hayes coordinated the attack with the calm focus of a man who had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. He directed attack groups to strike weak points in the enemy formation. He sent reserves to support ships in danger. He made decisions in seconds that would take other commanders minutes. Commander Hayes, an officer called out. The Veluxy flagship is moving toward us. They are trying to take out our command ship. Hayes looked at the tactical display. The Veluxy flagship was massive, easily 3 times the size of the Victory. Its weapons could destroy them with a single volley. All ships, concentrate fire on the flagship, Hayes ordered. Give them everything we have. 20 human warships turned their weapons on the Veluxy command vessel. Missiles streaked through space. Kinetic rounds punched through shields. Plasma lances burned through armor. On the flagship, Draxful felt his ship shake under the assault. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. Officers shouted damage reports. For the first time in his career, the Supreme Commander felt something he did not recognize. It was fear. Pull back, he ordered. Signal the fleet to pull back. We need to regroup. The Veluxy ships began to retreat toward the planet. They had never retreated before. They had never needed to. But today, against an enemy they had dismissed as primitive, they had no choice. The human fleet pressed the attack. They pursued the retreating enemy, continuing to fire at every opportunity. More Veluxy ships fell. The space around Cathar Prime filled with debris and fire. On the surface of the planet, the surviving Kethrans watched the battle through telescopes and sensors. They saw the Veluxy ships retreating. They saw the human ships chasing them. For the first time in weeks, they allowed themselves to hope. Dr. Laura Bennett, A human aid worker who had been on the planet when the invasion began stood at the entrance of an underground shelter. She had helped hide 3,000 Kethran civilians in old mining tunnels. They had almost run out of food. They had almost run out of hope. Now she watched lights flash across the sky and felt tears running down her face. "They came," she whispered. "They actually came." A Kethran child tugged at her sleeve. His silver scales were dull from lack of nutrition. His eyes were wide with confusion. "What is happening?" he asked. "Who is fighting the bad ones?" Bennett knelt down and smiled at him. "Humans. Humans from Earth. They came to help us." "Why?" Bennett thought about the question. She thought about her home planet. She thought about all the times humans had disappointed her, all the wars and conflicts and cruelties. But she also thought about all the times humans had surprised her with their kindness and courage. "Because that is what we do," she said. "When someone needs help, we try to help them. Even if it is hard. Even if it is dangerous. We try." The child looked up at the sky filled with fire and ships. He did not fully understand what was happening, but he understood that something had changed. Help had arrived. In orbit, the battle continued to rage. The Veluxi still had 30 ships left, and they fought with desperate fury. They knew that if they lost this battle, their reputation would be destroyed. No species had ever defeated the Dominion. They could not allow these humans to be the first, but the humans showed no sign of stopping. Ship after ship charged into the fight, crews knowing they might not survive. Pilots flew into suicide runs to protect their comrades. Gunners kept firing, even as their ships burned around them. Captain Sullivan watched a destroyer called the Resolute take a direct hit from the Veluxi flagship. The ship broke apart in a ball of fire. 200 crew members gone in an instant. She closed her eyes for a moment and said a silent prayer for the dead. Then she opened her eyes and gave her next order. "All batteries, target the flagship. We are going to avenge them." The Endurance joined 5 other carriers in a coordinated strike on the Veluxi command ship. Their combined firepower overwhelmed the massive vessel. Its shields collapsed. Its armor cracked. Its engines exploded. Supreme Commander Draxful died on his bridge, still unable to understand how this had happened. The remaining Veluxi ships tried to flee. Most did not make it. By the end of the day, only 7 enemy vessels escaped into hyperspace. The rest were destroyed or captured. Fleet Commander Hayes looked at the tactical display showing the clear space around Kethra Prime. The Veluxi fleet was gone. The planet was free. He opened the fleet-wide channel one more time. "All ships, this is Commander Hayes. The space battle is won. But our work is not finished. There are still enemy forces on the ground. There are still people who need our help. Prepare for the ground assault. We are going to finish what we started." Across the fleet, Marines and soldiers checked their weapons and loaded into dropships. The next phase of the battle was about to begin. The first wave of dropships punched through the atmosphere of Kethra Prime like arrows falling from heaven. Inside the lead ship, Colonel Ryan Mitchell gripped the overhead rail and watched his Marines check their weapons one final time. These were the best soldiers humanity had to offer. They had trained for years in every environment imaginable. They had learned to fight in deserts, jungles, cities, and space stations. Now they would learn to fight on an alien world. "Listen up," Mitchell shouted over the roar of the engines. "The Veluxi still have 40,000 ground troops on this planet. They are dug in around the major cities. Our job is simple. We go in, we kill the enemy, and we rescue every civilian we can find." Questions? No one spoke. They all knew what they had to do. The dropship shook violently as enemy anti-aircraft fire exploded around it. Mitchell felt his stomach drop as the pilot executed evasive maneuvers. Through the small window, he could see other dropships falling through the sky. Some of them were on fire. Some of them were spinning out of control. "Hold on," the pilot called back. "Landing in 30 seconds." The dropship hit the ground hard. The rear doors blew open, and the Marines poured out into a world of smoke and chaos. Buildings burned on every side. The sounds of weapons filled the air. Bodies lay in the streets, both Catherine and Veluxy. Mitchell raised his rifle and began giving orders. "First squad, secure that intersection. Second squad, clear those buildings on the left. Third squad, with me. We are pushing to the central plaza." The Marines moved with practiced efficiency. They flowed through the ruined streets like water, covering each other and eliminating threats with deadly precision. Veluxy soldiers appeared from doorways and windows, firing their energy weapons at the advancing humans. The Marines returned fire with kinetic rifles that punched through. Veluxy armor like Paper Dot Sergeant Danny Webb led his squad through a maze of burning structures. Private Amy Collins stayed close behind him, her rifle steady despite the fear in her eyes. This was her first real combat. Everything felt too loud, too bright, too real. Contact left. Someone shouted. Webb spun and fired 3 shots into a Veluxy soldier charging toward them. The alien collapsed in a heap of black armor and green blood. "Keep moving," Webb ordered. "Stay focused." They pushed deeper into the city, fighting for every block. The Veluxy were fierce warriors, bred for combat since birth. But they fought as individuals, each one trying to prove their personal glory. The humans fought as a team, each soldier protecting the ones beside them. That made all the difference. In the underground tunnels, Dr. Lavra Bennett heard the sounds of battle growing closer. The Catherine refugees huddled together in fear. They did not know if the fighting above meant salvation or death. Bennett gathered a group of volunteers and approached the tunnel entrance. She had a radio she had salvaged from a crashed transport. She tried every frequency, hoping to reach the human forces. "This is Dr. Laura Bennett, human aid worker. I am in the mining tunnels beneath Sector 7. I have 3,000 Catherine civilians with me. We need extraction. Does anyone copy?" Static filled the speaker for a long moment. Then a voice came through. "Dr. Bennett, this is Captain Kate Sullivan of the carrier Endurance. We copy your transmission. Hold your position. Ground forces are moving to your location now." Bennett felt tears of relief streaming down her face. "Understood, Captain. We will be waiting." "Thank you. Thank you so much." She turned back to the refugees and managed to smile. "They are coming for us. Just hold on a little longer." On the surface, Colonel Mitchell received the coordinates for the tunnel entrance. He redirected 2 squads to secure the area while the rest of his force continued toward the central plaza. The plaza was where the Veluxy had established their command center. It was surrounded by enemy fortifications and defended by their best troops. Taking it would break the back of the occupation. Mitchell studied the layout through his tactical display. The Veluxy had placed heavy weapons at every entrance. Charging indirectly would cost too many lives. "We need another approach," he said to his officers. "Any ideas?" Lieutenant Carol Adams, his second in command, pointed to a row of buildings on the eastern side. "Those structures overlook the plaza. If we get snipers up there, we can take out their heavy weapons from above. Then the main force can push through." Mitchell nodded. "Do it. Take your best shooters and get into position. We move in 10 minutes." Adams selected a team of 8 Marines and disappeared into the ruins. They climbed through shattered buildings, avoiding enemy patrols and booby traps. When they reached the rooftops, they had a clear view of the entire plaza. Adams set up her rifle and began identifying targets. "I count 12 heavy weapon positions, plus about 200 regular troops. This is going to be messy. Just take out the heavy weapons," Mitchell replied through the radio. "We will handle the rest." Adam steadied her breathing and took aim. Her first shot removed a Veluxy gunner from his weapon. Before the enemy could react, her team fired 7 more shots. 7 more gunners fell. The Veluxy scrambled to respond, but it was too late. Mitchell led the main assault through the eastern entrance, his Marines pouring fire into the disorganized defenders. The battle for the plaza was brutal and bloody. Hand-to-hand combat erupted in some areas as soldiers from both sides clashed at close range. Sergeant Webb found himself face-to-face with a Veluxy officer in black armor. The alien was larger than any enemy he had seen, its yellow eyes burning with hatred. "You will all die here," the Veluxy growled. "Your species is nothing." Webb did not waste time with words. He raised his pistol and fired 3 times into the alien's chest. The Veluxy stumbled backward and collapsed. "We are not nothing," Webb said quietly. "We are the ones who answered when someone called for help." The fighting continued for hours. Bodies piled up on both sides. Wounded soldiers were dragged to cover and treated by medics. Ammunition ran low, and some Marines were forced to use captured enemy weapons. But slowly, steadily, the humans advanced. At the center of the plaza stood the Veluxy command building. Inside, Ground Commander Krathvalum watched his forces crumble with growing desperation. He had sent countless messages to the fleet, demanding reinforcements. No response came. The fleet was gone. He was alone. Colonel Mitchell led the final assault on the command building personally. His Marines breached the doors with explosives and stormed inside. Veluxy soldiers fought back with everything they had, but it was not enough. Room by room, floor by floor, the humans cleared the building. Mitchell found Krathvalum on the top floor, surrounded by his personal guards. The Veluxy commander raised his weapon, but Mitchell was faster. A single shot knocked the weapon from his hand. "It is over," Mitchell said. "Surrender." Krathvalum stared at him with hatred. "Why? Why do you fight for these weaklings? They are not your species. They offer you nothing." Mitchell lowered his weapon slightly. "They asked for help. That is all the reason we need. You are fools. In this galaxy, only the strong survive. Compassion is weakness." "Maybe," Mitchell replied. "Or maybe compassion is the strongest thing there is. Either way, you lost. And we won." Krathvalum had no answer. He was taken prisoner along with the surviving Veluxy troops. As the sun set on Cathora Prime, the fighting finally stopped. Human soldiers walked through the ruined streets, helping Catherine survivors emerge from hiding. Medical teams set up field hospitals. Engineers began clearing debris. The work of rebuilding was beginning. Dr. Bennett led the refugees out of the tunnels and into the light. They emerged blinking and afraid, not sure what they would find. Then they saw the human soldiers standing guard. And they understood. They were safe. A little Catherine girl, no older than 5 or 6, walked up to Sergeant Webb. She held out a small flower, the only thing she had managed to save from her home. Webb knelt down and took the flower gently. "Thank you," he said, even though she probably did not understand his language. But somehow, she seemed to understand. She smiled and ran back to her family. Webb looked down at the flower in his hand. It was small and fragile. It should not have survived the bombing and the fighting and the chaos. But it had. Against all odds, it had. He tucked the flower into his pocket and got back to work. There was still a lot to do. The Battle of Cathora Prime lasted 11 days from beginning to end. When the final reports were tallied, the scale of what had happened became clear to everyone in the galaxy. The Veluxy Dominion had lost 38 warships, including their flagship and supreme commander. Their entire ground occupation force of 40,000 soldiers had been killed, captured, or driven away. An empire that had conquered 37 worlds over 3 centuries had been broken by a species that most of the galaxy had never heard of. The cost to humanity was significant. 12 ships destroyed, another 20 damaged, 4,372 soldiers, sailors, and pilots killed in action. Their names were recorded and sent back to Earth, where families wept and communities mourned. But humanity had also achieved something that no other species had ever done. They had stood against the Veluxi and won. They had saved an entire world from destruction. They had proven that courage and compassion could defeat cruelty and conquest. 3 weeks after the battle, Ambassador Vethran returned to his homeworld aboard a human transport ship. He had spent those weeks aboard the carrier Endurance, watching the human crews work and helping coordinate relief efforts. What he had seen had changed him forever. The transport landed in the central plaza of the capital city, the same plaza that had been a battlefield just days before. The rubble had been cleared. Temporary shelters had been erected. Catherine survivors lined the streets, waiting to see the ambassador who had called for help and the humans who had answered. Vethran stepped off the transport and felt the sun on his silver scales for the first time since the invasion began. Behind him came Admiral Jack Morrison, Captain Kate Sullivan, Colonel Ryan Mitchell, and dozens of other officers and soldiers who had led the fight. The crowd was silent as Vethran walked forward. Then, as if moved by a single thought, they began to applaud. The sound grew and grew until it filled the entire plaza. Catherines who had lost everything stood and cheered for the people who had saved them. Vethran turned to Admiral Morrison. His eyes were wet with emotion. "I do not have words," he said quietly. "I do not know how to thank you for what you have done." Morrison shook his head. "You do not need to thank us. This is what we do. When someone calls for help, we answer. But why? The Council abandoned us. Other species looked away. Why did humans come when no one else would?" Morrison thought about the question for a long moment. He looked at the ruined buildings and the wounded civilians and the soldiers who had given their lives for this world. "Because we remember what it is like to be alone," he said finally. "We remember what it is like to be afraid. Long ago, on our own world, we fought each other constantly. We caused terrible suffering to our own people. But we also learned something from all that pain. We learned that the only way to survive is to help each other, to stand together when times are hard." He looked at Vethran with steady eyes. "When we received your message, we did not see aliens asking for help. We saw people. We saw families and children and innocents being slaughtered by an enemy that showed no mercy. And we knew that we had to do something. Not because it was easy, not because it was safe, but because it was right." Vethran bowed his head. In Kethran culture, this was the deepest gesture of respect one could offer. "I will never forget this," he said. "My people will never forget this. For as long as Kethrans exist in this galaxy, we will remember what humanity did for us." The weeks that followed were filled with hard work and slow progress. Human engineers helped rebuild power systems and water treatment plants. Human doctors treated the injured and sick. Human soldiers patrolled the streets to keep the peace while Catherine society began to recover. Dr. Laura Bennett worked 20-hour shifts in the main medical facility, treating both human and Catherine patients. She had not slept properly since the invasion began, but she refused to stop. There were too many people who needed help. One evening, a young Catherine woman approached her with a small bundle wrapped in cloth. Bennett recognized her as one of the refugees she had protected in the tunnels. "I wanted to give you something," the woman said. "It is not much, but it is all I have." She unwrapped the cloth to reveal a small sculpture carved from crystal. It showed 2 figures standing side by side, one Catherine and one human. "I made this during the battle," the woman explained. "When I heard the ships fighting above us, I did not know what would happen, but I hoped, and I began to carve. I want you to have it, to remember us. Bennett took the sculpture with trembling hands. I will treasure this forever, and I will never forget you. Any of you. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Chamber to discuss the human intervention on Kythera Prime. Some species were angry. They accused humans of violating treaties and acting without authorization. They demanded sanctions and punishment. Others were impressed. They praised human bravery and questioned why the Council had refused to help. The debate raged for hours until Ambassador Vethron asked to address the assembly. He had traveled from Kythera Prime specifically for this moment. He stood at the central podium and looked out at the sea of alien faces. Some were hostile. Some were curious. Some were sympathetic. For 12,000 cycles, he began, this council has called itself a community. We have signed treaties and agreements. We have traded goods and knowledge. We have believed that we were united. He paused and let his words sink in. But when my people were dying, this council did nothing. When we begged for help, we were told that treaties prevented intervention. When our cities burned and our children screamed, we were told that it was not your problem. The chamber was completely silent. The humans did not share your treaties. They did not share your history. They had no obligation to help us. They barely knew we existed. But when they received our message, they gathered their ships and their soldiers, and they came to save us. They bled for us. They died for us. And they asked nothing in return. He pointed at the assembled representatives. Perhaps it is time for this council to ask itself some difficult questions. What does it mean to be a community? What does it mean to stand together? What does it truly mean to help someone in need? He lowered his hand and spoke more quietly. I do not have all the answers. I only know what I saw. I saw a young species, dismissed by most of you as primitive and unimportant, do something that none of you were willing to do. They answered a call for help. They risked everything to save strangers. And they won. He stepped back from the podium. Perhaps it is time for us to learn from them. The council debated for 3 more days. In the end, no sanctions were imposed on humanity. Instead, a new agreement was proposed. Any species facing unprovoked aggression could request assistance from the council. A rapid response force would be created to answer such requests. It was called the Vethran Accord, named after the ambassador who had started everything with a desperate message sent into the darkness. 5 years later, a monument was erected on Kythera Prime. It stood in the central plaza of the rebuilt capital city, on the same ground where so many had fought and died. The monument showed a human soldier holding out a hand to a Kytheran civilian. Below it, words were carved in both English and Kytheran script. A call for aid went out, and humanity responded in force. Admiral Morrison attended the dedication ceremony. He was older now, his hair fully gray. He had retired from active service, but he still visited Kythera Prime every year to pay his respects. As he stood before the monument, a young Kytheran approached him. The child could not have been more than 8 or 9 years old. Are you the one who came to save us? The child asked. Morrison smiled gently. I was part of it. But it was not just me. It was thousands of humans working together. Why did you do it? Morrison looked at the monument and thought about all the soldiers who had given their lives on this world. He thought about the families who would never see their loved ones again. He thought about the price of doing what was right. Because when someone asked for help, he said, you help them. No matter who they are. No matter how far away. You help them because that is what good people do. The child nodded solemnly, as if he understood something important. Morrison placed his hand on the monument and whispered a prayer for the fallen. Then he turned and walked away, leaving the plaza filled with Ketherans and humans who had come together to remember Dot in the sky above. Ships from both species flew side by side. It was a sight that no one could have imagined just 5 years before. But it was real now. It was the beginning of something new. Humanity had answered a call for aid. And in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. Some species still feared them. Some still resented them. But no one could deny what they had done. No one could forget the lesson they had taught. When someone needs help, you help them. That was what it meant to be human. And the universe would remember it forever.